Hi, I'm Isolde. My sister uninvited me to her wedding. Said I wasn't really family. But that wasn't the worst part. Worse was how they still asked me to pay for the wedding. How they used a lullaby my mother sang just to make it theirs. How my dad told the neighbors I ruined it all, just to save face. They erased me with a smile, a soft tone, a polite exclusion that cut sharper than hate. And yet, they still expected my silence. What would you have done? I didn't expect anything special that Saturday afternoon. The sun filtered lazily through the curtains of my small apartment in Richmond, casting golden squares on the hardwood floor. I was curled up on the love seat, cradling my tea in both hands, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. The stillness, the quiet, it was comforting. For once, everything felt settled. At 30, I wasn't chasing dreams anymore. I had a decent career designing interiors for homes I couldn't afford to live in. I had two close friends who never asked too many questions, and I had carved out a version of peace where I didn't expect anything from the people who shared my blood, especially not my father's new family. Then, while scrolling through Instagram stories, a name popped up. Erin, my old college roommate. We hadn't talked in months, maybe a year, but she was still following some of the same people from my past. And there it was, her story playing on loop, a video of women laughing around a table, champagne flutes clinking, balloons spelling out, bride-to-be. In the middle of it, dressed in white lace and wearing a tiara, was my half-sister, Nadine. Text over the video read, "Bridal brunch with the bride-to-be # Nadine Voss wedding." I stared at the screen, thumb frozen above the phone. My heartbeat stuttered. Just for a moment. A wedding? Her wedding? I hadn't received a call. No email, no, "Hey, just so you know." Nothing. Not even a forwarded invite that got lost in the mail. I locked my phone and set it face down on the coffee table. For a while I just sat there, my chest tightening like someone had laced invisible ropes around it and started to pull. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was a party for someone else. Maybe... I opened the phone again and typed a message to Dad. "Hi, just saw something about Nadine's bridal shower. Is she getting married?" The message showed as delivered. No response. I waited an hour, then 2. By the time the sun dipped behind the line of rooftops across the street, my screen was still blank. I tried calling, straight to voicemail. That night, lying in bed with the lights off, I thought about every single dinner I had been left out of, every birthday I didn't know about until weeks later, every Sunday call that turned short the moment Marjorie's voice was heard in the background. And now, this. The next morning, I texted a former coworker, who happened to be distantly connected to Marjorie's circle. She replied within minutes. "Oh yeah, Nadine's getting married next month. Didn't you know? Thought everyone did." No, everyone didn't. I didn't. I could have left it there. I could have swallowed the bitterness like I always did and kept my head down. But something cracked. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was something quieter, like disbelief turning into a slow burn. 3 days later, a text popped up. It was from Nadine. "Don't worry about the wedding. You're not invited. You're not really family, Isolde." I didn't breathe. I reread it 3 times. "You're not invited. You're not really family." I sat in silence. My tea had gone cold. The walls of my apartment felt tighter somehow, pressing in like I didn't belong in my own skin. How could someone say that like it was a weather update? Not a single sorry, not a question, just deletion. I stood up slowly and walked to my bookshelf. On the top was a photo frame, one I hadn't touched in years. My mother's face smiled back at me, that slight, knowing smile she always wore when she knew something I didn't. Her dark curls framed her soft eyes, the same eyes I carried in my own reflection. I whispered, "Did you see this coming, Mom?" My voice cracked at the end. I didn't cry. Not yet. But I felt it, something hollowing out in my chest, like someone had scooped out everything soft and left behind something hard and brittle. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept turning back memories like flipping pages in a book I didn't want to finish. Nadine was 5 when Dad brought her and Marjorie into our house. I was 15 and numb from losing Mom barely a year before. Nadine used to crawl into my bed and beg for bedtime stories. I'd hold her until she fell asleep with her thumb still in her mouth. I bought her birthday presents with my babysitting money. I taught her how to braid her own hair. When she fell off her bike, it was me who sat on the curb and cleaned her scraped knees, while Dad looked for the nearest pharmacy. I remembered the way she used to whisper, "Sissy," and hug my waist like I was her whole world. And now, I was not family. I reached into the drawer beside my bed and pulled out an old notebook, the one Mom used to write recipes in. It still smelled faintly like vanilla and cinnamon. Inside the front cover, she had written in cursive, "The family you build matters more than the one you're born into." Back then, I thought she meant the future. A husband, kids, a home of my own. Now, I wondered if she meant survival. Emotional survival. I closed the book and turned off the lamp. In the dark, I stared at the ceiling. Am I really that easy to erase? Maybe I was. Or maybe they were just too comfortable thinking I'd never say otherwise. The morning after Nadine's message, I didn't move for a long time. My phone lay face down on the kitchen counter, still vibrating occasionally from work notifications I wasn't ready to face. I wasn't sad, at least not in the way people expect. It was something else. Something that felt like acid under the skin, not enough to scream, just enough to make everything feel wrong. I went through the motions that week: shower, work, coffee, reply to emails, pretend to listen during design consultations, smile when the client asked, "Do you have siblings?" and feel that tiny sting behind the ribs as I said, "Yes, a half-sister." I didn't tell them we hadn't spoken properly in years. On Friday night, I was cleaning up dishes after a sad excuse for dinner when my phone rang. Not a text, not an email, a real call. The screen lit up with one name: Dad. I hesitated. Clive and I didn't talk much. Not since he married Marjorie. Not since I stopped pretending I was okay being a background character in their family highlight reel. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. "Hi." He cleared his throat. "Hey, Izzy. How are you, sweetheart?" Sweetheart. That word hadn't passed his lips in a decade. I leaned against the counter. "I'm fine." There was a long pause, a clink of ceramic, maybe his coffee mug. "Listen, I wanted to ask you something. It's not about you and Nadine. I know there's tension, but this is bigger than that. It's about family." "Here we go." "What is it?" I asked. "Well," he exhaled, "Marjorie's been organizing everything for the wedding, and you know how expensive venues are these days. The florist needs a deposit. Nadine's dress, it's custom. And with your career doing so well, we thought maybe, if you could help out a little." I blinked, stunned, silent. "You're asking me to pay for a wedding I wasn't even invited to?" "It's not like that," he said quickly. "You're still family, Izzy. This is just one of those times family steps up." The laugh that came out of me was bitter, dry. "You mean like how you stepped up for me when Mom died? Or when you decided I didn't belong in your new family unit?" "Don't twist this," he said sharply. "It's about support, not revenge." My hand clenched tighter around the phone. "So I'm good enough to bankroll your daughter's big day, but not good enough to sit in the audience?" "She's emotional. You know how brides are." "Right. Emotional. Like that explained anything." "I'm going to stop you right there," I said, voice low. "If this is the kind of family I'm supposed to support, I think I'll pass." Before he could respond, I hung up. I stood in the silence of my apartment, still holding the phone. The rage didn't hit all at once. It slid in slow, deliberate, like ink bleeding into fabric. I put the phone down gently, afraid I'd throw it. Then it buzzed, a notification from Aaron with a caption, "Girl, check this out." Attached was a screenshot of a group chat. The title bar read, "Voss Wedding Core Inside," a series of messages. Marjorie. "We still need someone to cover the flower deposit. Ask Isolde. Don't bring up the invite thing, it'll just make it messy." Clive. "She'll probably say yes if we spin it like helping Nadine." Nadine. "Whatever. Just tell her it's about family. She'll bite." I didn't realize I was holding my breath until my lungs burned. I read the messages twice, 3 times. Not one person said my name with affection. Not one message acknowledged that I might feel something. I wasn't a sister. I wasn't a daughter. I was a transaction. That was the word that echoed in my skull as I stood by the window. Transaction. Later that night, I pulled my journal from the nightstand drawer. the one Mom gave me for my 16th birthday. Most of the pages were blank, except for a few scribbled entries when I thought writing might save me from losing my mind. I opened to a fresh page and wrote, "They want me for what I can give, not for who I am. I miss you, Mom. They don't even pretend anymore." I paused, pen hovering above the paper. "I think you knew this would happen. You always knew who they were. You just didn't want to say it out loud." I sat there with the pen still in hand long after I stopped writing. The room was dark now, the only light a soft glow from the street lamp outside. I didn't cry. Again. It wasn't about tears anymore. I felt removed, like I'd finally stepped outside the burning house and realized I never had to walk back in. But the cruelest thing wasn't what they asked. It was how normal they made it sound. It had been nearly 2 weeks since the last call, since I heard my father try to spin guilt into a favor and frame absence as love. The silence that followed was, strangely, easier than I expected. They didn't reach out again. No one did, not even Nadine. So I filled my time with client work, project proposals, coffee runs, and pretending I still wanted to engage with a world that didn't know the version of me that was unraveling under the surface. But the silence didn't last. Late one Friday afternoon, just after wrapping up a consultation with a couple remodeling their kitchen, I got a text from Aaron. "You're gonna want to see this." Attached was a live stream link from a mutual acquaintance, someone I hadn't seen or heard from since college. My thumb hovered over the link for a moment before I gave in. The video loaded with background chatter and elegant floral arrangements surrounding an outdoor patio strung with fairy lights. I saw tables dressed in soft pastels and a small group gathering by a makeshift dance floor. Someone in a tuxedo stepped forward, holding out his hand. It was my father. Then I saw her. Nadine in a white lace gown, smiling like every camera in the world was trained on her. She reached for his hand, and they stepped into position under the string lights. The music started, and my heart stopped. Moon River. That song didn't belong to her. It wasn't some wedding cliché or a romantic oldie picked off a playlist. It was ours. Mine and Mom's. The lullaby she'd hum every single night, even when she was too tired to finish a verse. It was the sound of warmth when the world was cruel, the melody that lived in the walls of my childhood bedroom long after she passed. I hadn't heard it in 15 years. I couldn't bring myself to, not once, until now. And here it was, floating out of speakers at a wedding I wasn't welcome at, the soundtrack to a moment I should have never seen. I didn't realize I had sat down, collapsed, onto the floor until my knee hit the edge of the coffee table. The live stream continued. Nadine spun slowly, leaning into our father like she had known that song all her life, like it had been hers. But it wasn't. I ended the stream and stared at the dark screen, my reflection twisted in the glossy surface. My stomach churned, cold and tight, as something dawned on me, something that felt like a slap across memory itself. I got up, walked over to my bookshelf, and pulled out the old binder that held scanned copies of Mom's things, recipes, poems, pages from her journals. I had kept them digital, knowing the originals were packed away somewhere I didn't have access to, somewhere Marjorie had claimed as her territory years ago. Flipping through the PDF printouts, I reached the final page. The last entry, Mom's handwriting soft and cursive but fading slightly. "If Nadine ever asks about this song, tell her it's not hers. This was our lullaby." A coldness settled into my spine. I hadn't read that note in so long, but now it pulsed like a siren in my chest. How did Nadine even know that song meant something? How did she know to pick that song for that dance? There was only one answer. Marjorie. She had the originals. She had access to Mom's personal journals. She must have given the song to Nadine. Or worse, planted the idea, knowing what it would do to me if I ever found out. This wasn't coincidence. It wasn't some innocent mistake. It was deliberate, surgical. They didn't just cut me out of their lives. They reached into mine and pulled out a piece that still had Mom's fingerprints on it and twisted it into a stage prop. I sat still for a long time. No tears came. There was no room for them. I felt stripped of something I hadn't even realized I was still clinging to. This wasn't about invitations anymore. This wasn't about brunches or bridal showers or polite exclusions. This was memory theft, emotional vandalism. I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. This was the last line. You just crossed it. I stood up slowly, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady, too steady. I brought my laptop to the table, opened a new document, and started typing. Not an email, not a rant, just a list. A list of every time they blurred the boundary between family and fraud. Every manipulation, every dig disguised as care, every omission framed as keeping the peace. For the first time in years, I started writing down what I'd do if they ever pushed again. The next morning, my list still sat open on the laptop screen, the cursor blinking patiently at the end of the last line. I hadn't added anything new since midnight, but I couldn't bring myself to close it either. Somehow, just having it there, a living document of every invisible bruise, felt like armor. Then my inbox pinged. The subject line read, "Regarding your possible presence." It was from Marjorie. Not "Dear Isolde" or "We'd love to have you there." Just those 4 words, clinical and cold. I clicked. "If you do insist on attending, please coordinate your outfit accordingly. We suggest beige, champagne, or dusty blue. It's Nadine's day, and she's asked that there be no visual distractions. Thank you." No invitation. No RSVP link. Just wardrobe instructions. As if I were a background extra in a production I never auditioned for. I actually laughed. Loud, sharp, empty. Not out of humor, but because the absurdity of it all had finally tipped over into something surreal. They hadn't asked if I was coming. They hadn't said I was welcome. But if I did show up, I was to wear something that made sure I faded into the wallpaper. Later that evening, I called Dad. His voice picked up after 3 rings. "Isolde? I got an email from Marjorie." A pause. "Ah, right. Well, she wanted to give you a heads up, just in case you were thinking of coming." "Just in case," I repeated flatly. "Okay, so where would I be seated then?" He cleared his throat. "It's a tight arrangement this year. The family section's already full, but we could get you a nice spot near the back. Still good view of the stage and not near family, though." "Well," he trailed off. "Nadine was really particular about the seating. You know how brides are." There it was again, that infuriating phrase, as if emotional manipulation became acceptable the moment you strapped on a veil. "I see," I said. "So let me get this straight. I'm not invited, but I'm allowed to show up as long as I wear the right color, sit far enough away, and don't ruin the aesthetic?" "It's not about that. It's about avoiding drama. We want to keep things peaceful." Peaceful. I could almost feel the irony dripping through the speaker. "I'm sure you do," I said, and hung up. I didn't feel peace. I felt fire building behind my ribs. 2 days later, Erin forwarded me a message she'd gotten from one of her old styling contacts. Someone hired for Nadine's wedding. A forwarded screenshot. I braced myself. "For Isolde's look, please avoid white, red, or anything with embellishment. Nothing that might outshine the bride. She should look appropriately reserved. Understated?" Understated. That was the word they used. I wasn't even on the guest list, yet they had already assigned me a visual perimeter. Be neutral, be quiet, be invisible. I replied to Erin, not even invited, but still expected to look invisible. She texted back, "This is next level unhinged." Later that night, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, holding a dress I hadn't worn in years. It was deep burgundy, the color of old wine and unsaid things. Mom had worn it to her last wedding anniversary dinner with Dad. After she passed, I kept it wrapped in tissue paper, tucked away in a box like it might vanish if exposed to air too long. I slipped it on. It fit a little tighter around the waist. The shoulders sat sharper than I remembered, but it made me feel something I hadn't in months, rooted. I studied myself in the reflection, brushing a hand over the velvet curve of the dress. "If they wanted quiet," I said aloud, "they should have treated me like I mattered." And just like that, the countdown began, not to their wedding, but to my reckoning. A week passed. I didn't reply to Marjorie's dress code suggestion, and I hadn't spoken to Clive since that shallow conversation about seating. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd take the hint and leave me alone. They didn't. The message came on a Tuesday morning, sandwiched between work emails and a reminder about my dental appointment. It was from Nadine. Hey, we're still short on funds for the honeymoon. Can you help? No greeting, no explanation, no acknowledgement of the ghost she made me into. I stared at the screen, mouth slightly open, as if the words might shift into something rational if I just gave them time. But they didn't. They stayed as they were, clean, transactional, dismissive. I typed, then paused, deleted, then finally wrote, "Depends. Am I still not invited?" The typing bubbles appeared instantly. This isn't about that. It's about family helping family. That word again. Family. I didn't answer. By mid-afternoon, she sent a Google spreadsheet labeled honeymoon budget. Line items included 5-star resort in the Maldives, spa package, private villa, business class tickets, luxury cruise extension, estimated cost, north of $14,000. No thank you. No, this means the world to us. Just a polished list of entitlement. I scrolled through the spreadsheet, deadpan. A part of me wondered if she'd even considered how absurd it looked, asking the sister she publicly disowned to finance her tropical escape. I typed again. So, I'm good enough to fund your future, but not worthy of being part of your present? Her response came back almost immediately, like she'd been rehearsing it. It's not personal, Isolde. It's about what feels right. You and we're just different people now, but this is still family stuff. I reread that line 3 times. Not personal. The irony was bitter enough to taste. That night, I curled up on the couch with a glass of wine, trying to pretend my blood hadn't just turned colder. Erin texted me around 10, her message filled with nothing but a shocked emoji and a link to an Instagram story. I clicked. It was Nadine. Mid-conversation at what looked like a backyard wine night with her friends. Music playing low in the background. She held a drink, laughing. No, seriously, she has no kids, no husband, no real life. Her money's like the only thing she's got. I figured she might as well use it for something fun. The girls around her laughed. One of them even added, "Better than letting it sit in a bank, right?" And then they clinked glasses like it was some kind of joke only privileged hearts could understand. I sat still. Not angry, not surprised. Just hollow. I didn't replay the video. I didn't show Erin my reaction. I just closed the app and stared at the ceiling. There are moments where grief stops being dramatic, stops being about sobbing or yelling or pacing in circles, and instead becomes this low, constant buzz under your skin, like you're mourning someone who died and is still walking around. That's what it felt like with Nadine. I wasn't losing her now. I had already lost her, and maybe she was never mine to begin with. The next morning I sent one final message. The answer is no. You said I'm not family, remember? And then, for the first time, I blocked her number. It felt anticlimactic at first, just a silent click, and she was gone from my inbox. But something shifted after that. It was the first time I'd ever drawn a real line, not hinted, not retreated quietly, not swallowed my pride for the sake of peace. A full, unapologetic, deliberate no. For once I wasn't trying to make things better. I was protecting what was left of me. But drawing lines in the sand only works until someone dares to cross it. The morning after I blocked Nadine, I made a single phone call. It was to the event coordinator I had originally spoken to months ago, when Clive and Marjorie casually mentioned they were short on funds, and I, like a fool, offered to help. The woman answered on the second ring. "This is Lindsay, with Magnolia Events." "This is Isolde Rayner," I said, calm and level. "I need to withdraw payment under Contract Clause 5B. There was a brief silence on the line, then a rustle of paper. "You're the primary payer for the Voss wedding, correct?" "That's right." "Which portion are you looking to cancel?" "All of it," I replied. "The venue deposit, the catering, the cake, the floral arrangements. Everything covered under my payment authorization." She hesitated. "We're 6 days from the event. I'll need a written confirmation. You'll have it by noon." And she did. I drafted the email with the same clarity I used when designing project proposals. Concise, professional, irrevocable. By noon, all funds were frozen. A single sentence at the bottom of the email sealed it. "Please note this decision is final and non-negotiable." I didn't wait for a response. I simply closed my laptop, made myself a sandwich, and went back to work. Saturday morning. The wedding was supposed to start at noon. The weather was perfect, blue skies, soft breeze, the kind of day photographers pray for. But the venue was chaos. Aaron sent me a voice memo from across town. "Girl, you will not believe what's happening right now. No food showed up, the cake never came. They were scrambling to find folding tables and Costco sandwiches an hour before guests arrived." I sipped my coffee and said nothing. She added, "Marjorie is losing it, screaming at the staff like they stole her purse. Nadine's crying in the bridal suite. And Clive keeps calling you. He's called me twice already." I didn't respond. An hour later, Erin forwarded me a screenshot of a group chat that included one of her cousins, someone who worked at the venue. Nadine slapped her mom, screamed something about sabotage, then threw a champagne flute at the wall. Below it, a second message. "She's threatening to sue her own sister, loudly." I turned off notifications and went back to sketching out a shelving concept for a client's home office. The irony wasn't lost on me. While they scrambled to salvage a wedding built on entitlement, I was building something functional for someone who'd actually asked for help. Later that evening, I walked into the local cafe for my usual chai latte. It was quiet, just a couple of tables filled, and I recognized the barista, Jamie. She smiled at me. But just as I was about to place my order, a woman I didn't know turned from the sugar counter and raised an eyebrow. "You're the one who ruined your sister's wedding, right?" she asked, as casually as if she were commenting on the weather. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "She said you pulled the plug on everything, just because she didn't give you a front row seat. That's dramatic." I tilted my head, offering a tight smile. "You mean the sister who told me I wasn't family? That sister?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She didn't respond. I took my chai and walked out without another word. The stories spread like wildfire. Marjorie had already spun her version to the neighbors and the church ladies. Isolde, the bitter spinster, lashing out because she wasn't center stage. I knew how they'd frame it. Jealous, emotional, unstable. It was easier than admitting they'd built their castle on borrowed bricks, and I'd simply taken mine back. I didn't defend myself. Not online, not in person. I didn't call Clive. I didn't reply to the voicemail from Aunt Lydia. I didn't even read the email from Nadine's college roommate asking me to think of the bigger picture. No more explaining, no more context. I was done being everyone's footnote. That Sunday, I took a long walk down Monument Avenue. It was quiet, golden with spring light. I passed families taking graduation photos, runners pacing themselves for the 10K, and a little girl in a white dress chasing a bubble wand. For the first time in weeks, I felt unburdened. I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel shame. I felt power, not the kind that screams to be heard, the kind that simply knows. I'd spent my entire adult life trying to make room for people who would never make room for me. That part of the story was over. But predators don't stay quiet when prey learns to bite back. 2 days after the wedding imploded, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. Not texts this time. A call. My father's name glowed across the screen like a bad omen. I stared at it for a moment before I picked up. No, good morning. No, are you okay? Just his voice, dry, measured, and already defensive. "You've humiliated us, Isolde." I blinked at the ceiling, still in bed. "Excuse me? You could have said no in a better way. You didn't have to sabotage everything." I sat up slowly. "You mean by pulling back money I was never thanked for in the first place?" His tone didn't soften. "It's not just about money. It's about what it symbolized. And now, look what you've done." "Look what I've done?" I repeated. There was a pause like he expected me to apologize. "Maybe," he continued. "You can help make it right by covering Nadine's college tuition. I know it's a lot to ask, but it's the least you could do." I nearly laughed, but it came out like a dry breath. "Least for who?" He cleared his throat. "We're still a family, Isolde. At the end of the day, blood matters." "Except mine," I said, and hung up. That afternoon, Aaron sent me a link with no caption. Just a link. I tapped it. It led to a GoFundMe page titled, "Help Nadine Recover from Her Ruined Wedding, A Sister's Betrayal." At the top was a photo of Nadine, eyes red, face tilted toward her bouquet like a Greek tragedy mask. The description below made my stomach knot. Nadine has always been a kind, generous soul. Her wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, until her older sister Isolde pulled financial support out of jealousy and left the family in ruins. Isolde was like a second mother to her growing up. But sometimes, jealousy destroys love. I stared at the screen. No, this wasn't real. And yet, there it was, a public crucifixion in pastel fonts. I scrolled further. A list of donations, names I recognized from childhood, neighbors, relatives, co-workers of Marjorie's. Below the donation tally, comments. So sorry this happened to you, Nadine. Isolde used to be sweet. What changed? Tragic family betrayal. I sat still for several minutes. Then the notification buzzed again. A screenshot from Aaron. A Facebook post shared by Aunt Lillian. Some wounds cut deepest when they come from within the family. Please support Nadine. I closed the phone. That night, I stood in front of the mirror. I didn't cry. I just looked at myself, looked through myself. Mom once told me, you don't have to be in pain to prove you belong. I'd spent years mistaking pain for loyalty. I opened my laptop, stared at a blank email draft. For a second, I typed, you have no idea what you're enabling. Then I deleted it. Instead, I opened a new email, and one by one, I typed out short, direct messages to each person who had shared that GoFundMe post. To Aunt Lillian, to Uncle Brent, to Rhonda from across the street. Each message read the same. You know me better than that. Or maybe you never did. I didn't wait for replies. The next morning, I walked to the corner bookstore and bought myself a new notebook. Hardcover. Linen blue, clean slate. When the cashier handed me my change, she smiled and said, this one's sturdy. Good for beginnings. I nodded. That's the point. At home, I made tea and sat by the window. Outside, life went on, dogs pulling leashes, teens filming TikToks, an older couple arguing about where they parked. And I sat with my new notebook. No rage, no revenge, just a line in ink. I do not need to prove what they refused to see. I wasn't at war anymore. I was just not participating, and that felt louder than anything I could have said. But silence wasn't surrender. It was a storm gathering in still air. The air had turned, but it wasn't spring anymore. It was something sharper, thinner. A week after the GoFundMe post, just when the noise seemed to fade, it returned in a different form. Nadine uploaded a carousel of wedding photos to her Instagram. The first image, her in the white dress, beaming beside Clive. The second, a wide-angle shot of the reception with soft lighting, floral arches, and champagne flutes raised in frozen toasts. The last, a black and white shot of her twirling mid-dance, hair loose, eyes closed like she was the only person in the world who had ever felt joy. The caption read, surrounded by love, only true family made it, no drama, just bloodline. Subtle? Maybe to strangers. To me, it was a blade under velvet. My phone pinged twice, first from Aaron. Did you see her latest post? I think this was for you. Second, a screenshot from my coworker Jenna. Was that shade? Or am I reading into it? I didn't answer either. I just saved the image. And I sat there for a long time, staring at the final photo, at the way Nadine's head tilted back in perfect elation, as if I had never existed. Later that night, after dinner and dishes and 30 quiet minutes watching a nature documentary with the volume low, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number, no name. The message was short. You still don't get it. You were never one of us. Keep your money. Keep your pity. No punctuation, no emotion, just poison pretending to be truth. I stared at the words while sitting cross-legged on my living room floor. The only light came from the floor lamp beside the couch, casting long shadows across the rug. In one hand, I held my phone. In the other, a framed photo of Mom, her smile permanent. The corners of her mouth turned like she knew something the rest of us hadn't caught up to yet. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone. I laughed, a short, cold laugh that surprised even me. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't rage. It was the sound of someone finally done playing a rigged game. I stood up, walked to my desk, and opened the folder labeled College Fund. It had been sitting there for months. Inside, scanned documents, bank approvals, draft transfers. Nadine's name on all of it. I selected the folder, right-clicked, delete. When prompted to confirm, I didn't blink. Then I opened my email and typed 3 lines to Clive. There will be no tuition from me. You called me family when it was convenient. You made me stranger when it wasn't. I didn't wait for his reply. I blocked his number. Then I blocked Marjorie. Then Nadine. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt intact. Like each step was a brick being set into place, building the wall that should have always existed between me and their version of family. The next morning, I woke early. I didn't check my phone. I didn't scroll. I packed a single suitcase, nothing excessive. Just what I needed to feel like myself somewhere else. I locked the apartment, dropped the key into the mailbox downstairs, and ordered a car to the airport. No final glance back. No dramatic music swelling in the background. Just silence. And in that silence, I felt more free than I had in years. At the gate, I bought a paperback and a bottle of water. The woman behind me in line complimented my scarf. I said thank you and smiled. I didn't mention where I was going. I didn't feel the need to explain why I was leaving. Closure isn't a place, it's a decision. And I had made mine. No more proving, no more begging, no more contorting myself into someone who fit their mold of family. The flight attendant called my boarding group. I rose, gripped the handle of my suitcase, and stepped forward. The sky beyond the windows looked overcast, soft and heavy like a held breath. I exhaled. Maybe the wound wouldn't ever fully close. Maybe there would always be a mark where it used to burn. But I wouldn't keep scratching it open just to feel something. That was the difference now. I didn't need the pain to remind me who I was. I already knew. But even freedom comes with a shadow. And sometimes it still speaks in your mother's voice. 1 month later. The rain in Portland had a different rhythm. Less dramatic than Virginia storms, but steadier. Like it knew it had nothing left to prove. I'd been here 3 weeks. A quiet sublet near Alberta Street. The kind of place where people left handwritten signs on their fences that read, "Please take one," over baskets of lemons, used books, or thrifted mugs. I took a ceramics class on Thursdays. Nothing fancy, just clay under my fingernails and a wheel that spun until my thoughts caught up to my hands. Sometimes my pieces collapsed, the walls too thin. Other times they held. I liked that I didn't need everything to stand up perfectly. I started waking early, making coffee before the sun rose. There were no unread messages waiting, no phantom vibrations, no dread when my screen lit up, just a life, uncomplicated and my own. I hung a small piece of fired clay on the front door last weekend. I'd carved 2 words into it with a kitchen knife. I'm enough. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a declaration. It felt like a fact. Erin called me from back home a few days later. She never asked how I was, she just jumped right in. "You're not going to believe this," she said, "but Nadine's asking Clive and Marjorie to sell their Lexus." I blinked. What for? She burned through the rest of the wedding cash, wants to go back to grad school, says the family owes her one. I leaned against the kitchen counter, pressing the cold ceramic mug to my chest. And? They said no, Erin replied with a short laugh. Marjorie told her, "We gave you a wedding, not a lifetime subscription." Nadine lost it, called them selfish, ungrateful, accused Clive of emotionally abandoning her. I didn't say anything. "There's more," she continued. "Someone flagged their GoFundMe, the post's down. Apparently a few neighbors finally spoke up, said it felt shady, like manipulation." I walked to the window, watching a bus pull up at the corner. A teenager climbed off with a giant cello case, struggling to keep it upright. A man in a puffer vest helped her without a word. "The house is quiet now," Erin said softly. "No more strategy meetings, no more group chats, just silence. Clive hasn't mentioned your name in a week." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. It felt like a curtain had closed, not in triumph, but in quiet resignation. I thanked her and hung up. On Saturday, I flew back for 1 day, not to visit anyone. I brought a small envelope in my carry-on. Inside was a printed copy of a scholarship form, the same form I'd once filled out with Nadine's name, the one I never submitted. I took a cab from the airport straight to the cemetery. Mom's grave sat between 2 birch trees. Someone had placed a sunflower bouquet there recently. Not from me, maybe some neighbor, maybe no one at all. I crouched down and laid the envelope beneath the vase. Then I took out a sprig of dried lavender I'd kept in my bag and rested it across the stone. I didn't fix them, I whispered, but I didn't become them either. And somehow, that felt like the answer she would have wanted. I didn't stay long. Back in Portland that evening, I walked to the corner cafe for tea. The barista recognized me now, always called me early bird. The seat by the window was empty, the light warm against the wood-grain table. I pulled out my notebook and flipped past the old pages. Some filled with lists, others just fragments. I didn't need to write today, I just sat. The stillness didn't feel hollow anymore. The next morning, an email popped into my inbox. A local high school invited me to speak at a community session about resilience and selfhood in complex families. I read the message twice, then once more, and then I smiled. Yes, I thought, that I can talk about. Not to point fingers, not to drag names through the dirt, but because maybe somewhere there was a kid sitting in their room wondering if love was something they had to earn. And maybe I could tell them, you are already enough. You are already whole. You don't have to bleed to be seen. Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about knowing who you are after everything tries to tell you you're not enough. Looking back now, I don't regret walking away. I used to think love had to look a certain way. Shared blood, last names, matching smiles at dinner tables. But family is who shows up when you're broken, not who breaks you and calls it discipline. I learned the hard way that sometimes peace doesn't come from making things right. It comes from choosing yourself when no one else will. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own home, let me tell you this. You are not the problem. You are not too much. You are not a burden. You are someone who survived a version of love that tried to make you small. And now, it's your turn to build the version of family that sees you fully and stays. So, what about you? Have you ever had to walk away from people who claim to love you, just to finally breathe? Do you believe family is earned through action, not just blood? Let me know in the comments. If this story spoke to something in you, type 1 or tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if it didn't hit home, tell me why. I want to understand your side too. This space is for all of us. And if you want to hear more stories like this, raw, real, and from the heart, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll never miss what's coming next. Because the truth is, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just finally say, I deserve better. Thanks for watching. I see you, I hear you, and I hope you never forget, you're not alone.